Hi, everybody. Charmaine McGuffey here for Lunchtime Live. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I like to give just a minute for people to, tune in and tune on. And, when I start seeing people come on, then I know I've got a pretty good audience there, and then we'll get started. Today's topic is going to be a day in the life of a jail deputy, a day in the life of a jail prisoner. And, I'm going to talk a little bit about both of those things, both of those people, and what they do all day long and how that works out, for them. And, I always do like to start with a story. So I'm going to start with a little story today. I used to, I've worked on this floor when I ran the training academy, and I very rarely saw prisoners on the floor because it was a floor where we had the commissary and the maintenance and the training offices and things like that. So, and one day, every now and then I would see a prisoner, and one day I'm sitting in my office, I always had the door open, and there was a woman, she stuck her head in the door, and she was a prisoner, and she was very outgoing. She had a very outgoing personality, and so she said, "Hey, how you doing?" And I was like, "Hey, how you doing?" And we chatted for a minute. Well, I had this little candy bar sitting on my desk, and it had been sitting there for a while. I don't know, somebody gave it to me or whatever. And she's looking at that candy bar, and she said, "Hey," she goes, "are you going to eat that candy bar?" And I said, "Nah." I said, "Actually, I don't think I will." I said, "If you want it, you can have it." And so she said, "Yeah, I do, thanks." So she took the candy bar and off she went. About a month later, I saw her outside. She'd gotten out, and I said hi, and she came over and said hi. And I said, "Hey," I said, "that's right." I said, "I remember you." I said, I gave you that Kit Kat bar." And she looked at me and she said, "It was a Twix." And so I just thought that was so funny. She was paying attention. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about our jail and a day in the life of jail. Hi to Greg Burton. Greg, good to see you on here. Crystal Dandridge. Greg is the brother of my best friend, Robin Burton, and Gail Breslin's on. Hi, Gail. How are you? Good to see you, too. So as we go, I'm going to go ahead and get started because this half hour goes pretty fast. So let's talk about officers working in the jail. First of all, they're called jail service deputies. That's what we term it as. That's what they're classified as. And, they come in, they work a 12-hour shift now. So 7 to 7 and 7 to 7 is the second shift. So there's only two shifts. And when these officers arrive for work, I tell you, in the winter months and in the fall and so forth, that 7 to 7 shift, you're arriving to work and it's dark. And it's dark when you leave work. So you're spending the whole light of the day inside that jail working your 12-hour shift when you're a jail service deputy. So they park over in the casino parking lot. And, once you park over there, then they're going to get out of their car and they're going to walk over to the Justice Center. And we have two buildings down there. We call them George and Lincoln, right? And that's a way for us to identify where you are, particularly over our radios and so forth, right? But one's north and south, and they are called George and Lincoln. So depending on where you're assigned, you go to those buildings, that building, and you will go up to the briefing room. Now, officers arrive in that briefing room to wait for their shift to start. And some officers, they get there at like half hour early. They get there a half hour early so they can take their time, drink some coffee, hang out a little bit. And then you got your officers who, I'm telling you, they're running in that door at 2 till 7, right? And, they're pushing that elevator button 16 times, just trying to get up there on time. And I tell you what, they are... they're what we call Minutemen. That's what we always refer to them as. "Oh, you're a Minuteman," And so at any rate, the officers gather up, and 3 times a week, the supervisor will come out and she'll brief us. The supervisor, male, female, they'll brief us. And when we walk into the briefing room, there's a big, grease board there. And on the grease board, as you look at it, you get a little snapshot of what's going on in the jail, what has gone on in the jail while you were gone, because it's sectioned out for like how many people are in protective custody, disciplinary lockups, people that are on administrative segregation and things like that, so that you have an idea of kind of like, oh, okay, this is what we're looking at for the entire building. And then after your briefing, because the supervisor comes out, talks to you a little bit about what's going on, tells you what's happened while you weren't there, or any training memos or anything, and then most importantly, kind of looks you up and down, make sure your uniform looks good, make sure you're shined up, because that's the way we do things when we wear the black and gold. If you're going to wear it right and wear it proud, and that's what we do. So as an officer then, I would go right on up to my post, whatever that was, and once I get up to my post, I have a partner who walks up there with me. Now I want to get to that post about 5 minutes early, because that's my time to be debriefed on what's gone on that particular floor while I was off. Because likely I'm working pretty similarly the same floors most of the time. I mean, sometimes I can be different, but I want to know what's happened while I was gone. And the officers, there's 2 officers there, and we're relieving them. And the officers are going to tell us, well, so-and-so's on lock-in, or so-and-so's having a medical issue, or this guy right here, you got to, make sure he gets to this and that. And, they're going to tell you little things that are important for you to know. And then we're going to do the count, right? Because the count has to be right. That's like the thing. The main thing I'm concerned about as an officer is, do I have all the prisoners I'm supposed to have? And are they where they're supposed to be? Now, we've always trained officers to go out there and check the armbands. And the way that we do that count is the prisoners line up right next to their cell, so we can walk by, check the armband, make sure they're who they say they are, and, count those prisoners. Now, by this time, breakfast has come up, probably, from third shift, right? From that rotation, because now it's 7 o'clock, and the food has already been up, probably about 6:20 or so the food comes, and 6:25. And that food comes up on trays, and they're stacked. And officers, as an officer, I'm going to go out, and I'm going to give out those trays. I'm going to have a porter with me, which is a prisoner who, gets to have a little more freedom because they work out in the pod area and so forth. So so we give out the breakfast and so forth, and then we get started with, okay, who is going to court and that kind of thing. So next, I want to talk about a prisoner, right? So now I'm the prisoner, and I'm asleep in my cell for the beginning of that morning, and the wake-up call comes about 6:15, and the wake-up call comes over the intercom. Now I'm in my cell with likely another person, and we do double celling, and the prisoners go into those cells. They are randomly selected, so whoever that's what they call it, their cellie, right, or their roommate. That's a person that you get to know pretty darn well, right? And, like I said, they typically call each other cellies and things. If they don't get along very well, they call each other a lot of things. But anyway, so you get up, you get that call over the intercom, and so you're up, and now it's your responsibility, it's my responsibility as a prisoner to get dressed. I have a uniform, my prisoner uniform, and that uniform I'm wearing that all week long, okay? That gets changed once a week. We get a clean uniform. But I've got my uniform there. I get my uniform on. Now, we don't have any mirrors in there. We don't have any kind of glass in the cells, but it's a reflective piece of reflective material, and I can see my image in it, so I know I look good, right? And there's a sink and a toilet there. It's all in one piece, and I can get myself ready for the day, and that's what I do. The cell doors are clicked open because those are controlled by the control room officer. So when I hear that cell door click, I know, all right, I'm out. And I know that breakfast is coming. So I get over there, I line up for breakfast, and the breakfast comes, and I get my breakfast, go sit down and eat. And I know right after that that MedPass is coming up because I may be on prescription drugs. I may just need a Tylenol maybe. And a lot of us, know that, and as a prisoner, that sometimes you don't feel good. I mean, you're in jail and you're in there because maybe you're struggling with something. You're struggling with an issue, a mental health issue, an addiction issue, something like that. And you're coming in and you don't feel well typically. So you are really looking forward to that MedPass so that you can start working your way back to health and you can actually see the nurse, because a nurse comes on the unit and she'll stand there and I'll stand in line as a prisoner with my little cup of water. And when she gives me those pills, whatever it is I'm taking, I know that I have to swallow those because there's an officer standing right there. And, I'm going to have to open my mouth and show, hey, I swallowed that pill, because, you can't have people hoarding pills. I mean, that's a bad thing. So as a prisoner now, I know that I've got to go back and clean my cell. I've got to clean my cell. I've got to help clean the day space area too, but clean my cell, make my bed, and get all of those items in order for the officer to come in, because if none of that's in order, I know that the TV is not going to get turned on. So the TV gets turned on when all of those things for the morning are accomplished. And that's the beginning of my day as a prisoner. And then once the TV's turned on, then everybody's out in the units and we can watch TV. They could play cards, they play board games, and there's just a whole lot of things for them to do, as far as cards and TV. But that is very minimal. When I say a whole lot, I just mean in the way of kind of the mundane things that you would do in a pod that you're going to spend your whole entire day in, and the following day and the following day. Now, if we don't have enough officers, and this is something as a prisoner I want to pay attention to, if there aren't enough officers to work the floors, I'm going to end up being locked in my cell all day. And I do mean all day. I could be in there for the next 20 hours, right? And maybe get out for an hour of recreation or something like that. But, those are things as a prisoner, I don't want that to happen. And unfortunately, that is happening for some prisoners down there right now because of the staffing levels and so forth, and some things I'm going to fix when I get there. So at any rate, now, as the officers move along, they are focused on getting, here's the officer side. Now my focus is to get these prisoners to where they need to go. There is a tremendous amount of movement inside that jail. It's a beehive, man. Once everybody's awake, I mean, you've got people coming and going, and there's a ton of people that have to go to court. So you take them over to court, make sure the rover takes them. We have rovers, and those are officers that don't work a steady post right there for the day. Their job is to run back and forth, and I do mean they run back and forth. Those rovers are busy. And as a supervisor, I can tell you this, you always want really good rovers, because really good rovers make sure things get done. And there's a lot to do in a day in a jail. They have to do sick call, so I've got to make sure that anybody that is going down for a sick call is going down and they're in the right place. I have to make sure the right people go to court, however many they are. I have to make sure if somebody has a probationary hearing or something like that. And there's just so much movement. On the female floor, we actually bring the nurse up, and the women can just go into, we have a separate room that they can go into for exams and things like that. So the females are typically, they take a little bit longer in medical. They tend to have, more medical issues and things like that to take care of. So as an officer, I'm going to be looking for, how the order of the pods are doing, the pods. And when I say pods, I mean there's a control room that I'm sitting in as an officer, and it's all glass. So I can see a 360 around me. And there's a little hallway there separating then the pods that are also all glassed in. It's a special kind of glass, so it's the kind of glass that's very, very unbreakable. And so I go and I can look out, I can see all of the pods, and typically I'm a housing officer, right? And then there's a control room officer. So just two of us on that floor, and we could be supervising depending on how many prisoners we have in there with double celling and stuff. I mean, we can be supervising up to 90 prisoners for the two of us. Now, those pods are sectioned out. Some of them are smaller, and some of them are larger pods for the more general population. And I know as an officer that those smaller pods are typically, they're focused on some specialties, right? Like the heroin recovery pod is a specialty pod that we select a certain few women to go into because that is going to be an isolated situation for us. So at any rate, as an officer, once I get all of those things done, I got to make sure my trays go back down. I'm on the computer, I'm logging in all of the comings and goings. It doesn't matter if somebody comes up onto your unit to bring you a mop, right? You log it on to the computer. That log is timed and it is daily. So we keep a very, very tight control over. You could look back and see what goes on in that day. So at any rate, then, the prisoners now are, they're up, they're either out or they're in the pods. And I'm going to get back to the fact that as the major, I used to walk the jail. I'd walk the ship. I think it was important for me to get out there and make sure I see day to day what's going on and talk to people. I interacted with officers, I interact with prisoners, and what I saw as the major, and I knew this from working in that jail, is there are a whole lot of young men and women who are sitting around doing very, very little with their lives. And, that always struck me. Like, wow, these are people that have potential. These are people that have lost their way, that are healing for some reason. And we need to, instead of turning them out of our jail with nothing, we need to try and offer opportunities to them. And that's what we do. That's what I did. I created the Women's Heroin Recovery Pod, the Men's Veterans Pod to help them with housing, the Men's Exit Pod, and a lot of other ancillary, smaller programs to, one, keep the prisoners engaged, to try to help them with their education. I started a book club for the women of general population with some volunteers who would come in and do the book club. And, those are things that we need to do. We have I'll just say it this way, we have a captured audience, right? And because we have them there and because they are there, they typically do want to engage with us. As a prisoner, I'm going to sit there and look for any opportunity to pass my time. And if I can pass the time as a prisoner without getting in a fight with my cellmate, without, having somebody steal something from me, or, just be so bored in front of the TV, which as a prisoner, I'm relying on that TV for a lot of my day to entertain me. And the TV is controlled, by the way, I know this as a prisoner, the TV is controlled by the jail. We in the jail control what goes on that TV. And when things go on in the pod, if somebody's acting out or there's a fight or something like that, there is the possibility that that TV could get turned off, that any of the games or cards could get collected. I mean, that people can, I could end up in lock-in and be in there because I started an argument with someone, or I wasn't getting along, or I argued with a jail service officer because maybe I'm having a bad day. So those kinds of things can happen to you as prisoners. And the officers are very, we train our officers to be mature, and what they are and what I tell them is, you guys, this is when I was the trainer, they're trained observers. That's who our officers are. They're coming into that jail, and there is nobody that is trained to observe like a jail officer. Nobody that's trained to do what's called like a pat down and that find things in cells, find things on a person, that the jail officers are excellent at it. I can tell you that right now because we do it. It's a skill. And we have a really, really tremendously great skill in observation. We observe things. So the nighttime shift, once the 7 to 7, I'm in there for 12 hours. I've brought my own lunch in, likely. I've eaten lunch there. I've hung out, working the job and being there in that jail for my 12-hour shift. And now I leave and the other 7 to 7 comes on. And that 7 to 7's coming in the dark as well. It coming in the dark and leaving in the dark. So, and a lot of the same things go on the night shift as far as just the order of things. The med pass goes on. Feeding prisoners goes on. It is a stressful and dangerous place to work in jail. But you know what? There are routines. And as long as you hang on to your routine and you do your routines well and you follow your training, it's going to be a good day. So what I'd like to do is tell you too, I've got a few minutes here to wrap up, and I want to tell you something that I think is really important. It's something that sticks with me about the jail. People have heard my first day jail story, when I very first walked into that jail as an officer. Well, when I walked in there was a woman who was in the pod that I was supervising in the unit, and I'm just going to call her Al, okay? And she was a young woman like me. She was a prisoner, and I was an officer. And, over time, she and I learned to get along together. I'll just put it that way, right? But here's the thing that I think about. I worked in that jail for 33 years. And even as the major, as my life went along, and I gained promotions and did things and so forth, I would see her come in and out of jail. I mean, sometimes I wouldn't see her for a couple years, and then she'd be back. She had let's just say, a very outgoing personality, and she could be a little challenging at times. But you know what? I knew her. I talked to her. We developed a professional relationship with each other. And even as the major, I continued to interact with her inside that jail periodically because she came and went that much. And we've led, and she's now about my age, right? And we've led these parallel lives, and I think about her because I actually like her, and sometimes I see her on the outside. Sometimes I run into her and we say, hey, we chat for a minute or two, and her life is going in her direction and my life's going in the direction it's going in. But I will say this, and this is what every person, a good jail service deputy knows, is there for the grace of God go I. And I've always kept that in mind because, given my life circumstances and what could happen to you and the way things work, in your life and what befalls you, you don't know. Sometimes you don't have control over. And you could be trading places I could be trading places with anyone who is in that jail and vice versa. And that's what I keep in mind. It's certainly the way I train the officers to think about it. Let's treat each other with respect and let's know why we're really there and what our job really is. And, you do get to knowing the people who come in and out of that jail, many of them, and that's not a bad thing. Establish the rapport. And I always encourage them not to come back. I tell you that, 100%. So I have a few minutes to answer questions. And somebody, Nicole Kungle. Hi, Nicole. How are you? I see Julie Ayers is on here too. Hi, Julie. Nicole Kungle asked, how did the names of the buildings come about, George and Lincoln? Well, that's an interesting. There were a group of men who were designing that jail. And they named the buildings after two presidents. That's what they did, George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. And that's how they did it. I don't know what the discussion was, but that's the way it came about. And so I've got Sandy asks, is it stressful or dangerous to work in a jail? Yes, on every level. It's that way all day long. It's very, very stressful. There are so many things going on, and you can't miss anything, because if you miss something, that's your responsibility, particularly if you're an officer who's on the suicide watch, right? Your suicide watch, you're responsible for those people's lives, and you can't take that lightly. You can't take any responsibility you have inside that jail lightly, because things can happen in a second. I mean a second. And then you are working on trying to restore order, trying to make sure everybody's where they're supposed to be, and that all the rules, regulations, and policies are met. So I just want to tell you that, I did ask a jail officer recently. I said, what do you think would be the best qualification as far as what you want to walk in the door with as a jail officer to be a good one? And what she said to me was maturity. Maturity and life experience. That's what helps you be a good jail service deputy. That you come in there understanding that people aren't objects. They're real people, and they're there. They're there for lots of different reasons, and it's your responsibility not just to supervise them, but to help them, to make sure that, some of their needs get met, that we can meet, and that they, have an opportunity to move on in life, and most importantly, that they stay alive in our jail. That there aren't drugs coming in, that somebody doesn't overdose with some, illicit substance that got, smuggled inside the jail. Officers have a huge responsibility for that. And one of the things she and I talked about is the fact that, both of us have been around a very long time, and we grew into the officers we were as well. We came in with a certain maturity. Of course we did. That's why we're good as we are today. But we also grew as we experienced all of these different things that go on inside a jail. You're seeing people in some of the worst circumstances of their life. They're not happy. Sometimes they're very sick. They're homeless. They don't have things to look forward to. There's depression. There's mental illness. And we as officers have grown to understand and know how to work with those people so that when we walk out that door at 7, because we worked 7 to 7, when we walk out that door at 7, we know in our heart, and that's the main thing, we know in our heart that we have done the absolute best we could for everybody that we touched that day, everybody that we talked to, everybody that we saw. And, because it's a stressful job, I do encourage officers to pay attention to their mental health, and make sure that that they get, if they need to talk to people, that they're doing that. And the prisoners, it's stressful for them too, because it's kind of one of those things where you hurry up and wait all the time. You're constantly waiting for something, and you know how that feels. You're constantly waiting for something, like you're gonna, and then in 2 minutes you got to be ready and go and let's go, right? And that's what you're told to do, and you jump on the elevator and there you go. And then you're waiting again for hours. You can wait in holding cells for hours getting called into court. And that's even worse time, because there aren't any TVs in there. There's nothing to do but sit there and wait. And I think that's a problem that we have in the jail, is that we are housing people without any opportunity for them to combat that kind of boredom and what happens, So Nicole Kungle says, does HCSO officers have responsibilities that would be best handled by other agencies, either one that exists or could be created? Absolutely, and thank you, Nicole, for that, because you're exactly right. There are a lot of times in that jail that social workers are needed. We need people who come in there who are attuned to mental health issues, who are attuned to social service issues. And, one of the things I want to do as the major is I want to build those roles. I want to build that out and provide more of those people, because ultimately it makes the uniformed officers' jobs easier. And Lord knows they have enough to do. Believe me, if you know a corrections officer, if you know a jail service deputy, ask them. They'll tell you. They like to talk about their job, and we train them to be good communicators. And that's exactly who they are. So they will talk to you about it, and you should. If you know an officer, talk to them and ask them about their day. So this half hour goes so fast. If you have any future topics you'd like me to cover or things to talk about, please write them in, send them to us, and I'll get to it. And also, please remember, follow us on social media and share my social media, share my Facebook post, and, help to get me elected, because I'm going to continue to do these kinds of things and tell you how it really is and be so transparent that you can see right through it. And that is going to be something unheard of in law enforcement. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. See you next time, next Thursday.